However, putting all your eggs in the policy basket is also a problem. Because, and if I can use now a global example, and yesterday our colleague from NZAID talked about the challenges with multilateral institutions. So when President Wilkinson was the president of the World Bank, and it's interesting, first we had President Wilkinson and then we had President Wolfowitz. My 14-year-old daughter asked me when this happened, she said, "Dad, do you have to be a wolf to be the president of the World Bank?" But yeah, and just bear in mind that the World Bank preaches to the developing world good governance. You must have good governance. So if you take, and when President Wilkinson was there, after many fights with him, I actually developed a very deep respect. He comes from this part of the world, by the way. He's Australian. Eventually, we got into a respectful dialogue, and there were times we would get to a point where we would say, you know what, folks, I agree with you that there should be more transparency and we should have a policy. You know, we'll be pushing for a policy for more transparency. If you are lending to Samoa, then tell the people of Samoa what you are signing in the contract. Don't just sign it to the government and the people are in the dark and they don't know what's happening. You know, that was the policy we were pushing for. And then he would say, yeah, but the board of the bank will not let me do that. Then you ask them, who is the board of the bank? The board of the bank is governed on a $1 one vote system, so that rich countries have a disproportional influence over the decisions, and most of the decisions affect citizens in poor countries. And importantly, most of the time without the informed consent of their own citizens in rich countries. Now, if you go to the United States and ask people in the United States, firstly, do you know about the World Bank? You'll be lucky if 1% of the people know about the World Bank. Then after 1%, if you ask them, do you know about how it is governed? And more importantly, that the president of the World Bank has to be an American. And the managing director of the IMF has to be a European. And the president of the United States virtually has a unilateral right to appoint the president of the World Bank. And then you go preach to the people in the developing world about good governance. Give us a break. So today we have to think as civil society the levers of intervention on the geographical level, local, state, national, regional, global. And we also have to think about governance changes, policy changes, and how we can do better delivery. Because delivery is important. By the way, I'm not making a value judgment. I'm not saying delivery is not important. But if you want to be brutally honest, if you take all the big NGOs in the north, right, put all the capacity together in terms of what they're delivering on the ground in the south, through their partners or independently, again, they're doing this much, and the scale is this much. And that is why, in the whole development debate today, more and more people from the south are saying, civil society particularly, is saying, we need to understand this is not about charity, this is about justice. Right? Africa, my brothers and sisters, is not a poor continent. Africa is one of the richest continents underneath the ground, and precisely because of that, we are one of the poorest continents above the ground. That is not to say our own leadership is not culpable, but let's be very clear that in fact we are talking about a set of unequal relationships that are historically defined. I mean, today you go and look at the so-called nation states of Africa. I don't know how many of you know, they were determined at a conference in Berlin in the 18th century where all the European powers were going to go there and kind of carve it up. And they said, rather than have wars there, let's sit down in Berlin. And they carved it up in ways that today the nation states of Africa do not make linguistic, social, cultural, economic sense of it. Right? And so then when you have Burundi, Rwanda, where historically the Tutsi, Hutu divisions were nothing like our French colonialism, and all colonialism was driven by a divide and rule policy. Right? And I'm sure this is not a surprise to anybody in this room. But so you can stand by and say, oh, look at those savage Africans, look how they're behaving. But we must be careful not to de-historicize the challenges that we actually find ourselves. So the Millennium Development Goals in this context, and to link the democracy and development piece very quickly. How many of you have heard of the Millennium Development Goals? I don't want to make an assumption that everybody has. Has anybody not? Okay, so everybody. But let me just take you back. We talk about the MDGs now as if we've all been excited about it right from the get-go. But the MDGs was adopted in 2000. When it was adopted in 2000, the majority of civil society did not embrace it enthusiastically. Why? Many reasons. I don't have time to go into all of them, just one or two. One, when you look at previous UN commitments, like on gender equality that was committed in Beijing, and then you look at what's in the MDGs on gender, it's a total reductionist, it's lacking in vision, and it's a total setback, right? If you look at any constituency of citizens, young people, and what previous commitments were made to various different conventions and so on, it's a setback. So people say, well, why should we get excited about this? The second issue is goal 1 to goal 6 on hunger, on HIV/AIDS, and so on maternal health, and so on. These are the responsibilities of developing countries. And those goal 1 to goal 6, clear benchmarks, targets, deadlines. Goal 7, which is on the environment, which is a shared responsibility of North and South, and goal 8, which is the responsibility of the North in terms of aid, debt cancellation, technology transfer, trade justice, and so on. No benchmarks, no deadlines, no targets. It's a double standard yet again. So I want to put this to you in a very graphic way. Every single day on the African continent, 6,000 men, women, and children die from HIV/AIDS alone. Every single day on the African continent, 7,000 men, women, and children die from malaria. Another 3,000 from tuberculosis. When you add up just from those 3 diseases, you're talking, if you want to put it, if you want to quantify the loss of human life, we're talking about the equivalent of 5 9/11s every single day. This is not a problem. This is a passive genocide or a silent tsunami, if you want. When we went to the G8 as part of the global call to action against poverty these last couple of years, and this year in Germany, I have to tell you, people who know me will tell you that I'm a wishy-washy, sort of lovey-dovey type of, reconciliatory type of person, and I'm always the bridge builder and so on. And usually, but I have to tell you, I totally lost my diplomacy eventually. And I said we had this meeting with Angela Merkel as the G8 presidency, and eventually said to her, Madam, look me in the eye and tell me that if every day in North America and Western Europe, about 15,000 people were perishing from diseases that we know how to handle, that we've wiped out in many parts of the world, look me in the eye and tell me that you will still be saying that we can't meet the 0.7% target. And let's be clear about the 0.7% target. This is not a new target. This target was set in 1970, at a time when many countries were coming out of colonialism. Right? And it wasn't done as an act of charity, an act of generosity. It was a commitment. It was never put down in paper, but it was done with the understanding that this was an act of redress for the injustices of colonialism.